Hello everyone, welcome back. In this video I wanted to talk about how we could solve and create a rock cliff crumbling effect where we have something like this. And the main idea that I want to implement is I want the sim to start with big blocks first, and then as it goes down I want them to separate, and then as they go even further down I want them to separate even more. And you can see that effect here. So this, if we follow that group, it started off with this, and then at some point it broke off, and then if we follow that, you see now it started separating, and then it hit the ground and it separated even more. And we this is the main part of creating a realistic cliff falling, that the rocks are going to continue disintegrate, and all of this could be mixed with the crumbling effect or the uprise approach. So we can have, on top of all of this, we could fracture this even more, and then as the pieces separate we can activate we can activate RBDs here, and that's gonna make it look 10 times bigger. But this is the main layer. And if you guys remember from the very first weeks, I talked about how important it is to get the recursive setup done this way. And the main reason for that is because I wanted to have access to the recursive layer, the recursive fracturing. And what I've done here is I have a box with a divide to get enough edges, and then I fractured that once. So this is, let's say this is layer number 1, and then I did another fracture, layer number 2, then I did another fracture, layer number 3, and then number 4, and I assembled that. So this is my blocks, but now I have backup. I have information about how this is done, and we don't want to cluster this. We don't want to use clustering, because when we do the cluster, we're not going to get nice edges like this. We're not going to get these cracks. We're going to get blocks. We're going to get this or this or this. We're not going to have nice edges that we can control. This way we have that. We have that control, so we can do whatever we want to do with our sim. So okay, we have these. This is my fractured layers, and then let's take a look at the colors based on the attributes. So this is center ID 1, center ID 2, 3, and 4. And what I've done is we want to create constraints. And for the constraints, the way I'm going to do this is by creating constraints that holds all these pieces together, okay? And then another constraint that holds all these pieces together, and then a third constraint that holds all these pieces together, and then the fourth one is gonna hold these guys together. Actually, I'm not sure about the layers, but let me show here. So I loop over the center ID 1, and for each block I create a connect adjacent sub. So now I have no in between. Each block is separate, so we don't have to worry about them sticking together. And then if I loop over the center ID 2, we're gonna create constraints that holds these blocks. And if I do that, then I have no worries about the separation. Everything is gonna be individual clusters. And then the last but not least is number 3, center ID 3. And that's holding them up together. It didn't do 4 because there's no layers here. This is being held up by 3, so there's no further layers that we need to hold. And this is all my constraints, layer 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then I'm naming them as well. So constraint name glue 1, glue 2, and glue 3. And that's it. I don't need this. This is my constraints. And then for the geometry, nothing special. I'm just setting the active attribute on all of them, and then grouping some pieces and setting that to active to be number 0, so that they hang in space for a bit longer. And that's it. If we hit play, It's our crumbling effect. Now, this is not all of it. Sorry, I mean, this is one part of it. And the next part is creating the constraints. So I have the setup importing the RBD objects, this, the bullet, and a pop force was just a bit of noise, because if we don't have if we don't have force, certain blocks may not start falling. Okay, they will hang on top and they will not fall. With this force, they will be given a chance to slide, and then a pop drag to slow down everything. And I have the constraints, so all of them. And let me hide the geometry. And here I color them with red, green, and blue for 1, 2, 3. So those are the constraints. And then inside the subsolver, I'm separating each one of them. I'm separating each block. So let me hit play so we can see the result. So if I hit play, okay, so let me pin this. So if we hit play, you will see that everything is working. Let me disable this. So what I've done is I imported the constraint network here, and then I'm isolating glue 1, glue 2, glue 3, and then using a transform piece. So this is my geometry that I imported as well. I needed the geometry, and then using a transform piece to transform the glue itself. So here, for example, I have the glue and I have the geometry, and I'm using a transform piece. You can see we're transforming the glue, and then because we're moving it in space, I can use a delete node to delete the glue. And what I've done is I have a delete node that deletes the glue that starts here, and it's growing over time. So you see it's growing over time. So this deletes glue 1, and then glue 2 is going to be deleted in this region. So if the piece is let's move it up. Let's move it up here. So if the geometry enters this, glue 2 is going to be deleted, and then glue 3, I'll move it up here. Glue 3 is going to be here. So as the geometry starts falling, we're deleting constraints, different level of constraints. And then this one, I'm simply restoring the rest position, because we're transforming the pieces, the constraints, with the transform piece, and then we need to restore them back. So let me double check that I have a rest attribute. Yeah, I have a rest attribute here. And that's pretty much it. We delete the constraint based on their height, and that's gonna cause the pieces to separate, or that's what holds the pieces together. And then as we delete them, so that's 1, and see here, now that this started to separate. Obviously, because they are falling at the same speed, we're gonna see different results. But what we could do is we can introduce different mass on the object, and that will cause them to vary a bit from each other. And maybe let's do that. Let's create a randomize attribute, and let's call this mass, and it's 1 and 10. That's the randomization level. And let's dive inside, see if that helps. I also have this pop force, which we could introduce another one that starts here, and then another one that starts at a different level by using an if expression inside this. We could control the amplitude. For example, if p dot y is less than 3, I want the amplitude to be, let's say 100 or 1000, just to show you. And let's copy this and add a new one. Delete this. And I'm gonna set this to 0. Let's hit play. Yeah, it's already less than 3. So let's try -5. Yeah, so they reached -5 there, and that's when this started. So I'm gonna set this to 5, and then if it's between -3 and p dot y is higher than minus, yeah, let's try this. Yeah, maybe that -3 and higher than -5. Let's see if this affects it. Basically, I'm adding a noise that only activates between -3 and -5. That's the idea, and I think it's working. So you can see the crumbling here as the first block, and then here they get separated even more, and then more. And you can drive you can use any condition you want. The main idea I wanted to show is how we can create clusters based on the level of fracture. And we could do this. We could use this technique to create multi-layered fracturing, or a controlled multi-layer fracture. Let's say we fracture everything, and then we make a glue cluster for this that holds all the pieces at this level. So basically, we're looking at the fracture like this. This is how we see it, and then we have like an up-res system that is this, and we can turn this on based on a specific condition. If the velocity gets really high, or if the impact is very, very high, then we could break these pieces and then and do something with them. But this is the main approach for doing a cliff falling, and we could layer this with the with our up-res sim as well if we wanted to add some really high res crumbling. And this is going to make it, again, if you have like a giant cliff crumbling, it would probably slow down this a lot. So let's do a retime. And I also have, let's do a time. No. Should work. I don't have an ID attribute. I do have an ID attribute. Yeah, I'm not sure why it's snapping back and forth. It should work. Okay, let's see. Okay, so it's working. Let's try 0.2. And I also have I did an up-res on the interior faces. So if I do an exploded view, see we have more details now. Let me hide this. And if we scale it down, slow it down, it's gonna feel much bigger now, and we can use that up-res system. Maybe it's too slow. No, it's not interpolating correctly for some reason. Yeah, I'm not sure why it's not blending, why it's not working properly. Maybe I need a different ID attribute. But this should should do it. Anyhow, let's do time blend here. Maybe it works on this one. Yeah, it's working on the geometry now. So by slowing this down, you can make it feel much bigger. Now obviously you have to have the proper scene, proper cliff to make this look more realistic, but that's how you would make use of the fracturing layers. And again, this is much better because we're not going to have random clusters. We're going to have perfect edges that we can nicely, that's going to help create a more realistic fracture and separation. And that's pretty much it. Thank you guys for watching, and see you in a bit.